Elementary Algebra, Final Assessment 2 Review, Questions 17 through 18, Outcome 4, Applications. In this section, in the instructions we're asked to solve, question number 17 reads, Tim invests $81,000 in two plans. Plan 1 is at an APR of 7% and Plan 2 is at an APR of 10%. If he invested $6,000 less in Plan 2 than in Plan 1, how much can he expect to earn in 1 year? So let's start with the first part. He invested $81,000 in two plans. Our two plans are Plan 1 and Plan 2. The two summed together, he invested $81,000. This creates our first equation. But before we begin, let's go ahead and change Plan 1 to A and Plan 2 to B. This way we won't accidentally incorporate the numbers 1 and 2 into the problem. All right, let's continue and see if we can read out another equation. It says if he invested $6,000 less in Plan 2 than in Plan 1, how much can he expect to earn in 1 year? This gives us a second formula. So we know, now looking at this, that in Plan 2, which we called B, is going to be whatever he invested in Plan A minus or less $6,000. Now that we have the two formulas, let's combine them together to find out how much he's invested both into Plan 1 and Plan 2. We'll start with our first formula here. A plus B equals 81,000. So we'll take that A plus B, but let's go ahead and plug in what we know B to be from the second equation. We know that B is equal to A minus 6,000 equals 81,000. Let's solve for A. Combine the like terms, so we have 2A minus 6,000 is equal to 81,000. We'll continue by by adding the 6,000 to both sides. So plus 6,000. This leaves us with 2A plus 0 equals 87,000. Next, we'll divide out that 2 onto both sides. This clears the 2, and we find that A is equal to 43,500. Now, if you remember, looking back, Plan A is Plan 1. So in Plan 1, he's invested 43,500. Let's find out how much he invested in Plan B. Well, if you remember, or if you look back, B is going to be equal to A minus 6,000. So let's plug that in. We know that A is equal to 43,500 minus the 6,000. So Plan B, which is also Plan 2, is going to be equal to 37,500. We now know how much was invested into each plan, both Plan A and Plan B. Now, if you look back to the original problem, it says that Plan 1 was invested, or the X amount was invested into Plan 1 at an APR of 7%. And X amount then was also invested into Plan 2 at a 10%. So we can plug that into a formula. We know that Plan A, which was 43,500, We got an extra 0 up there we need to get rid of. And here as well. Let's just accidentally added 1 extra. Was invested at an APR of 7%. We'll translate that to decimal, 0.07. Plan B, we'll add to that, plus Plan B, was invested at an APR of, so Plan B at the 37,500, an APR of 10%, so 0.1. We're going to go ahead and simplify this to find out how much he earned in 1 year. So the 43,500 times a 0.05 comes to 3,045. The 37,500 times 0.1 comes to 3,750. This comes to a total of 6,795. So he can expect to earn in 1 year $6,795. Don't forget the dollar sign in the final answer. In question number 18, you're asked, in a chemistry class, 9 liters of a 4% silver iodide solution must be mixed with a 10% solution to get a 6% solution. How many liters of the 10% solution are needed? Whenever you're making a mixture, start with a table. The table, in this case, because it is a mixture, this time should have 3 rows, but still has 4 columns. So we're just going to make sure that there's 1 extra row. That extra row will actually be used for the solution that we're creating or mixing, and it'll be put in the bottom row. So let's start with our categories. What are our categories here? When we look at them, we look back at the question, our categories are going to be the 4% silver iodide, the 10%, and then our 6%. The 2 that go in the top are going to be the 2 that are being mixed together. We're mixing the 4% with the 10%. The one that we're creating is the 6% solution, so it goes into the bottom. Next, we want to turn those percentages into decimals. The 4% rewrites as 0.04. Our 10% rewrites as a 0.1, and our 6% as a 0.06. In the next column over, we want to just look at our initial volume. What did we start out with? How much? Well, when we look at it, the only one that we know an exact value for is the 4% silver iodide. We know that we started with 9 liters of the 4% silver iodide, so we can put that information in. What we don't know is how much of the 10% we're going to mix with the 4%. When we don't know the answer, then we put in a variable to hold the position. For this last position or last place in this column for the 6%, what we know is that we're going to add whatever the 4% is to the 10% to create the 6%. So we can add down. It's going to be 9 plus x. Now we'll multiply across. So we have our 0.04 times 9 for our volume on the 4%, a 0.1 x for our volume on our 10%, and a 0.06 times a 9 plus x for our volume on our 6%. Next, we need a formula to plug this into. Well, we know that the volume of our 4% plus the volume of our 10% is going to equal our final volume for our 6%. So that gives us a formula to plug these numbers into. We have a 0.04 times 9 for the volume on the 4%, plus a 0.1x for the volume on the 10%, and a 0.06 times a 9 plus x for the volume on the 6%. Let's simplify. 0.04 times 9 results in a 0.36. Carry down the 0.1x. On the other side, we'll continue to simplify by distributing that 0.06 through the parentheses. This results in a 0.54 plus 0.06x. Next, we want to start moving one of our terms across the equal sign. Let's look at moving the 0.06x to the other side. We do that by subtracting. So we're going to subtract a 0.06x from a 0.1x. This is going to result in a 0.04x. Carry down the 0.36 as is. That's a positive. Carry down your equal sign and your 0.54. Right, we're going to continue this by moving the 0.36 to the other side of the equation. We'll do this by subtracting it off both sides. So minus 0.36 over here as well. So this comes down to 0. We're left with the 0.04x is equal to a 0.18. Lastly, we'll divide out the 0.04 off both sides. This will clear it from the left, leaving us with x equal to a 4.5. This x, if we go back and look, is going to be the initial volume mixed with that other 9 liters. So we need to make sure that we include in our answer liters.